Direct from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, you're listening to the ECTRIMS podcast, a new scientific sounding board for the MS research community and the official podcast channel of the European Committee for Treatment and Research in Multiple Sclerosis. I'm Brett Drummond, co-founder of MS Translate and host of this special episode of the ECTRIMS podcast. I'm on site here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where ECTRIMS 2022 has wrapped up day 2 of its 3-day congress. From hot topics on escalating and de-escalating DMTs to scientific sessions on quality of life for people living with multiple sclerosis, this year's presentations are focusing on the most relevant issues facing the MS research community today.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this next session, the most exciting session of the whole meeting.
The cluster of venial endothelial cells feature the most immune-reactive endothelial cells, at least in the mouse EAE brain. And this cluster is very much enriched in cellular response to vascular endothelial growth.
We are still a long way of knowing the best way to manage the many consequences that we face in pediatric onset MS.
So the biggest gap in the PF10 score and the physical function score in this year is around 50, 60, 70 years of age.
Overall, we found that the individual ability to repair the lesion was strongly correlated to disability. And the more you repair, less disability you had.
It's important to emphasize the benefits of these therapies. They reduce relapse rates and the risk of disease progression. However, they are not without risk.
Today I'm joined by Tim Coetzee, Chief Advocacy, Services and Science Officer at the National MS Society. Tim, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Brett, for the invitation. It's great to be with you and your listeners.
So this year at ECTRIMS, we're seeing over 8,600 MS researchers and experts from around the world come together to discuss cutting-edge research on the treatment, pathogenesis and diagnosis of multiple sclerosis and related disorders. Day 2 has been an eventful day. So Tim, I wonder if, to start with, you can talk about the fact, in your role at the National MS Society, you represent so many different sectors of the multiple sclerosis community. Can you tell us what attending a meeting like this means for you and the importance of it? Certainly.
Well, within the MS community, we all share a vision, and I know all of the attendees share the vision of a world free of MS. And a key part of creating a world free of MS are the people who will help us create that world. And that's what the scientists are here to do. I like to say that people will discover the cure to MS, and people are also the ones who will, find those improvements to the quality of life for people with MS. And being around the ECTRIMS attendees and all of the fellows, the senior faculty, and everyone coming together to really talk about that and to share information, share ideas, figure out how we can collaborate, but also, I think, re-energize the spirit of the MS community after what's been a really difficult and challenging period. Really being around and seeing the energy is really inspiring to me, and I know it will be inspiring to many people in our community. Yeah, certainly. I think we all felt yesterday that there was a real buzz being back in person after a number of years of having this conference virtually. You could really feel the excitement, not only to be back together, but also about the topics that we were going to be discussing. Certainly, and I think that's what's been so rich, to see the poster sessions where you've just got a range of research and a range of experiences, but also, I think, a number of important perspectives. What's really inspiring about the MS community is that it continues to push the field forward. And we've seen such transformation in the treatment and care of people affected by MS over the last 20 to 25 years. And what I'm just struck by is it seems the pace is really picking up. The innovation that we're seeing is really continuing to feed the field. And I'm just excited by what the future holds for our community. Yeah, definitely. And you talk about the breadth and depth of research that's being done, and that's certainly on display at the conference. And we could spend hours talking about all of the different things that are going on here. But to keep it to a podcast length, what were some of the themes of the talks that you've seen today and presentations that you saw today that have really caught your eye? Certainly, there's a couple of sessions that I was really found fascinating. One was the one on the lifestyle and wellness factors. And that's such an important aspect of MS that I think over the last 5 to 10 years has really come into the fore. While there's a lot of emphasis on what the disease-modifying treatments can do, We also know that addressing lifestyle factors, exercise, diet, and all of those factors can really have a significant impact on the disease, its course, and how people can live, and also how they manage their quality of life, which is also quite applicable whether a person lives with a relapsing MS or progressive MS. So all along the continuum, that really matters. And part of what we have to do is continue to support the exciting research in that area and also start seeing that research be translated into the application in the clinic, so that when the person is meeting with their doctor, they can actually find ways to do these practical, tangible steps in their life to make a difference. Another session that I think I found so exciting and inspiring was the session on progressive MS, where seeing, first of all, several thousand people gather was in and of itself really quite remarkable. But also hearing from Maria Piesformani on the important ways that we can think about innovation in clinical trials for progressive MS. And particularly the talk that I heard from one of the fellows talking about genetics and the ability to connect the genetic underpinnings potentially around disease severity and progression was really a breakthrough session that I really left inspired. And what inspired me about that was the linkage between large-scale collaborative efforts like the International MS Genetics Consortium, but also the many years of trying to understand progression and linking those two together in a way that hasn't been done before really, for me, was a significant breakthrough. And again, just very excited to see where that is going to take us.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about those sessions, I guess, in a little bit more detail, in the lifestyle intervention session, one of the things that I think is really important is that there's been a real understanding from the MS research and MS clinical community about the importance of this for people living with multiple sclerosis. And one of the quotes in there was around what one of the presenters hears from the people that they see in clinic about how empowering it is to feel like there's something that they can do to take control of their daily life, even though they're living with a chronic illness. And I'm sure this is something, again, that you see in your role at the National MS Society.
Certainly, and I think we can't underestimate the importance of that, when it comes to living with MS, a person lives with that, and, people want to be able to know that these tangible actions that I take can give me the opportunity to change the direction of how I experience the disease, to have a bit more energy, to manage my fatigue. And, seeing that partnership between the researchers and people affected by the disease to be able to then have those tangible outputs really matters. I think the other aspect of it that is also, I think, really so encouraging is that the scientific community is seeing is that it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. Some people might, find exercise with Nordic walking sticks to be able to be interesting. Other people may find walking in a treadmill. Personally, I find walking in a treadmill numbing. So if I can get outside, that's better. But for others, it may be, hiking, swimming, whatever the it is. And I think the power of it is to send the message that it's not necessarily one thing. It's what works for you as a person affected by MS. And to be able to do that together as researchers and people with MS is important. I'd say the big unmet need that we as a community need to tackle is that there are many studies that are done, but we also need to increase the scientific rigor of those, and we also need to translate those so that when an insight is made in a study, it can then be taken forward into the clinic. And that's the responsibility we have as an MS community to really focus on that. And I see that as future work for ECTRIMS and others.
Right. And I think that was something that was discussed in that session as well around, while we see that there's importance of these things, we need to help clinicians be able to translate that through to the patients that they see. And I think one of the things that came up that you're probably really well suited to talk about is that there has been some guidelines published around exercise for people living with multiple sclerosis that has brought together all of this evidence that's now been generated.
That's right. And so the National MS Society, along with others, have really brought together a work of really a group of key opinion leaders to help us really provide sort of the expert perspectives on what exercise can mean for people with MS. And, fundamentally, the theme is exercise, whatever works for you, engage in it, do it consistently, do it with discipline. And whether you're relapsing or progressive, find what works for you and start and do it consistently. And that will have, long-term benefits. One research gap I would say that's also been identified through this, and this comes from some of our work within the context of the International Progressive MS Alliance, is that far too many of the studies focus on the relapsing population, and there has not been sufficient focus on the progressive population for whom some of the things, such as walking on a treadmill, 30 minutes of aerobic exercise on a treadmill, may not be viable. And so we need to think about, well, how do we conduct studies in the progressive MS population so that those patients can also have the kinds of benefits that are needed. And that will require some adaptation, but really something that we need to think about as a community.
Right. And I guess progressive MS is the other session that you talked about. And I think this shows, we've heard from people living with MS for a long time that there are things that they want to hear about. And I think ECTRIMS is placing a large focus on making sure that research is highlighted, lifestyle interventions being one, progressive MS being another. In terms of the progressive MS session, you mentioned a couple of talks. What are your thoughts generally in terms of how much progress we're making in that space?
Certainly. So, I think about 11 years ago now, I had an opportunity to be part of a session where we brought scientists and individuals from industry to think about progressive MS. And it was challenging. There were a lot of treatments available for people with relapsing MS, but the progressive community felt correctly, we feel we're being left behind. And that inspired us to start the Progressive MS Alliance, to try to create opportunities to work with other organizations like ECTRIMS and others and the scientific community to shine a light on progressive MS. And I would say that, certainly in the last 11 years, there's been really important progress. The fact that there are approved treatments for progressive MS is important. We cannot underestimate the importance of those first approvals. Are these treatments, everything we want? Absolutely not. But they're a start. And that's what we thought about in MS when beta-seron was first approved in 1993. That opened the door to what we have today. I see an opportunity both in terms of new treatments that are coming forward, but also when you look at the sessions today, the number of scientists that are focused on progressive MS, thinking about the different dimensions of the disease, thinking about ways that we can track disease activity so that we can intervene early, and really getting at the question, how do we stop someone from ever transitioning into what we know as progressive MS? That's the grail.
That would be amazing.
It would be amazing, but I think, to do that, we need to understand what underlies the disease. And what's happening here is that's what we're getting at. We're getting at that underlying disease activity. And it really is, to me, the field has shifted so quickly and the progress and profile is increasing so highly that I think the next 2 and 3 ECTRIMS, we're going to see even more progress in this possibility. So I'm really looking forward to Milan to see how much more has been done next year.
Yeah, certainly. And I think in terms of what I got out of the progressive MS session, that links back also to what you were talking about with lifestyle interventions, and it was in talks yesterday as well, is that we can't use a one-size-fits-all approach to the research that we're doing. And talking about the clinical trials in progressive MS, we need to think differently about these to the clinical trials that we've done traditionally for relapsing or remitting MS. And it's really exciting to see the talks and the work that's being done in that space to try and really revolutionise that area.
Exactly. And I think that's the kind of, conceptual innovation that ECTRIMS through forums like this really can inspire, where you have, leading scientists proposing new ideas, but then also, the emerging scientists who are the ones that, have new ideas that can see the leaders and can then be inspired to think about, are there new trial designs for us to consider? Or importantly, the power of settings like this is the hallway conversations that can happen, can inspire, different opportunities, which gets at, the point that people are the ones that come up with ideas for the innovation and the breakthrough ideas. But that happens through the person-to-person contact, both in settings like this, but also virtually. And so I'm really, I think that session really was a powerful reminder that, for us to make advances in progressive MS, we're going to need to both address how we do clinical trials, but also how we measure disease activity to create the environment in which new drugs can be tested quickly and effectively.
Yeah, certainly. And it is very interesting sitting in those sessions talking about the discussions that happen. You sit through a presentation, feel like you've learned a lot from the presentation itself, and then the question and answer session happens and you go learn even more and more.
Exactly.
Those discussions are critical.
Exactly. And that session in particular was a beautiful, I think, illustration about how the work that ECTRIMS is doing to create a platform for both, senior investigators to have the opportunity to really share how the field can move and be shaped, but also the number of junior investigators that are presenting their science and hearing and seeing the questions. That's the power that experiences like this can have when one is, developing as a scientist, and then to be able to see, and that attention to being able to develop the next generation of scientists is also something that I really credit ECTRIMS for their work in creating a venue in which people can have that experience, which can be so formative for their contributions.
Yeah. So, we talked about the buzz about being back in the room after obviously a difficult few years. Having now gone through 2 days of talks, how are you feeling about the progress that's being made in multiple sclerosis research despite having had such challenges over the past few years?
Well, I would have to say that what was remarkable that, while certainly there have been disruptions of different things that were just very practical, the sustained focus of the community on MS really has been, I would say, almost unchanged. And really the energy and enthusiasm to get back to work has really, you can see it through the session. And so from the standpoint of someone who has a leadership responsibility, for one of the organizations that funds research in this area, I'm just really feel positive around how the community weathered this. They were resilient, they stayed focused, and they kept moving forward. And we made an awful lot of progress despite incredible headwinds. And I think what it says to me is that the momentum is there and that it's just going to keep on getting faster. And that as we have subsequent meetings, we're going to see even more progress in the community.
Yeah, certainly. And so I guess while there are thousands of researchers and clinicians at this meeting having these conversations, there are also millions of people around the world who are living with multiple sclerosis that are eagerly awaiting to hear about the developments being discussed, part of the reason behind the ECTRIMS 365 and the podcast that we're doing. What would your message be to them, or messages to them coming out of day 2 of the conference?
I think, we can... One message I would give is that there is reason to hope that, we are at a place where the doctors are able to spot the disease earlier, have better treatments to be able to stop the disease as early as possible, and it's hopefully soon in its tracks, as we would say in the States. But also, if someone is living with progressive MS, that the community is absolutely committed to finding the solutions that can change the trajectory of somebody's disease journey when they live with progressive MS. Ultimately, I think we need to continue to be focused on changing the disease journey for someone who maybe has lived with MS for 3 days or who has lived with MS for 30 years. And I have a sense that this community has a shared commitment to addressing those journeys and to making a difference. And so I think I'm inspired by the work that I'm seeing, and I believe we're going to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you also for all of the hard work that you do to help people living in the multiple sclerosis community and improve their lives, as well as for participating in the podcast today. So thank you very much for your time.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm so glad to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity.
So thank you, Tim, and thank you all for listening. Please join us tomorrow as we continue with this special ECTRIMS 2022 series, highlighting all the essential research elements of the Congress. You can subscribe to the ECTRIMS podcast on all of your favourite podcast channels, including Spotify and Apple. Visit the official ECTRIMS 2022 website to learn more about the ECTRIMS Congress and join in the conversations on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube.